Story time about when I demanded my girlfriend show me where she buried our beans in the woods, causing her to break up with me. With everything that was going on, we stocked up on supplies, including some canned goods. I ordered a few weeks ago 30 cans of beans. 10 are black beans, 10 are kidney beans, and 10 are pink beans. Also, I ordered 15 cans of chickpeas. I thought this is a reasonable amount of beans and chickpeas to have every now and then that would last for quite some time. However, earlier this week I opened the cabinet because I wanted to make vegetarian chili using 2 cans of beans, but all the beans were gone. What the hell? I asked my girlfriend and she told me that she buried all of the beans in the woods. At first I thought she was joking, but she explained no, she had buried the beans in the woods. What the fuck? I asked her to explain and she told me that she was afraid that if things get bad, we might have to worry about looters or whatever and that the beans would be in danger of being stolen. I said I thought this was completely ridiculous and unlikely. She became angry at me and said that she's protecting our beans. According to her logic, the beans are safely buried in the woods behind our apartment complex, and if we ever need some beans, she will go to the stash and dig up a can or two, but would prefer if we save them all for if things get worse. I said, why only bury the beans? Why not bury our more valuable items? She said that canned food was the most valuable in long-term means, and that since we get fresh food in our online grocery deliveries, it would make sense to continue to stockpile beans. She intends to go bury more beans in the woods every week. This was too insane for me and I got very upset. I demanded to know where the beans were buried, and she refused to tell me. She said if I knew, she was afraid I'd dig them up. I said damn right I would. She said, I will never jeopardize the beans. The following day, I tried to put my foot down, and I'm not usually a foot downer, but there are rare issues where compromise is out of the question, and I foolishly decided that this was one of those issues. I demanded to know where the beans were buried, and I told her that if she was going to bury beans that I paid for in the woods, that I would move out. We fought about it, and I kept insisting. In hindsight, I should have just let it go and created my own hidden stash of beans in the apartment and given her time to maybe cool down about this bean burying scenario, but I blew it all out of proportion. Yeah, it's weird to bury beans in the woods, but why did I have to press it? What's the harm at the end of the day? In the grand scheme of things? But I kept demanding her to take me to the beans, or at least draw a map or something, and finally she broke up with me over beans. I've lost the love of my life because I couldn't let the damn beans go. I am in disbelief. She moved out. Not only am I heartbroken, but now I'm paying full rent instead of 50%, which is a huge financial issue for me. I'm 57 and my son, 28, recently approached me upset about something his sister, 30, told him about the past that she's apparently still resentful of, although she's never spoken to me about it. My daughter has always been anxious and from a young age, around 5, did a lot of weird rituals to make herself feel better. These rituals often required my husband and I to participate, and we generally went along with it to make her happy. In middle school, she stopped this habit but developed a new one where she would lie frequently to me and my husband. At one point, she was almost a month behind in school, and when her teacher reached out to us, we were both blindsided because she'd been deceiving us that everything was fine. She would also lie about things like who she was or having a boyfriend, which was very secretive. When she was in grade 7, I saw in our computer browser that she'd been Googling OCD. I questioned her about it and she said that she thought she had it and wanted to go to a doctor, using her childhood habits as proof. I felt that she was lying again to excuse her school performance, and we told her no. She intermittently argued about it with us for 2 years. At that point, I discovered by reading her journal that she'd also gone behind our backs to the guidance counselor at school and told the woman that we wouldn't help her. I grounded her for lying again, but a few months later, we did take her to the doctor. She has more or less been in treatment since then. My son recently asked me if I really denied her medical treatment. To me, she's making it sound like I was negligent when she really was a liar, and that's why we didn't take her initially. We have paid for specialists and supported her for years, and I think she's putting all the blame on me / making me look bad to my son and not taking responsibility. I'm upset with her sneaky behavior and want to confront her, but my husband said to leave it. My daughter had a wonderful childhood, and I hate that she's complaining about the past behind my back. We did our best and we did help her. She has never mentioned anything to me about still being resentful. Am I the asshole in this situation? My wife and her friend went out drinking on Friday night and she didn't come home till 4 in the morning, which had me worried sick. When she finally came home, she was very drunk and was almost being dragged by her friend. The friend had a guilty look on her face and asked me to be patient while listening to her account. I was of course alarmed. What account? The friend left saying it's better if my wife told me. My wife was obviously out at this point, so I went to sleep. Around 11 a.m., I'm woken up by my wife crying and saying that she committed a horrible mistake and she's very sorry. She was hysterical at this point and I had to calm her down, and finally after calming her down, she told me that she had gotten so drunk last night that she hooked up with a stranger. I was shocked and I pressed her for details. She said that they had met 2 guys while drinking and they were buying them rounds. At first she says she turned the drinks down, but when her friend expressed an interest in one of them, they went to talk to them and accepted the drinks from them. My wife was given the responsibility of keeping the friend of the guy busy while her friend talked to the guy. Eventually, after some time and a lot of drinks later, they went to the guy's home, and this is where she had sex with him. My wife says that she went there just to make sure that her friend was safe and she had no ulterior motive. She did admit to some harmless flirting with the guy, but said it didn't mean anything. Sure. She was adamant that she didn't want to have sex with the guy. Then I said, maybe you were forced. Let's try to find out who the guy was first. I asked for more details, but again, she said that she didn't remember. So I went to the pub in the evening to ask around, and luckily the guy my wife's friend hooked up with was there too. When I talked to him, he painted a completely different picture of the night. He said that he and his friend were very clear with both my wife and her friend from the start that they were looking to hook up, and my wife and her friend never raised any objection. He also said that my wife absolutely knew what was going to happen once they went back to the house. I didn't get to meet the other guy who hooked up with my wife, but I did talk to him on the phone, and he also said the same thing. Both women knew exactly what the deal was, and they still still went to his house. I did get heated with him, but he insisted that he didn't force anyone. He was just as drunk as she was, and it was completely mutual right from the moment they started talking at the bar. He said I could check the security footage to see how my wife and her friend were acting on that night. I tried, but they wouldn't show me the footage without a police report. I don't know what to think here. My wife insists it's not the case, but did admit to flirting with him. Those guys insist it was mutual. My wife doesn't want to file any case against them, and I'm at a loss. Only one thing is clear to me. My wife put her friend's sexual life ahead of our marriage, otherwise why go to a stranger's house after midnight? I'm totally lost. What should I do?
Story time about how my high school principal tried to date me after I graduated. TW, if you think this is gross, don't watch. And disclaimers, is not my story time. It's been 10 years since this happened, but when I was in high school, I was really popular. I was in the cheerleading squad, the badminton team, the volleyball team, and drama club. All the teachers knew me and I got along with almost all the students. I never had any problems with girls or guys. My high school principal was a huge history buff, and so was I. One day I went to his office and asked him if I could start a history club. He was really impressed by this and he said yes. I started asking students if they wanted to join, and mostly it was only boys, and these were the boys that I knew had a crush on me, but I made a promise to my parents that I would focus solely on school and not boys. So that meant no boyfriends for me, and I was totally fine with that. I wasn't boy crazy or anything. I really just wanted to get into a good college and make my parents proud. After I formed the club, the principal asked me if he could sit in on some of the sessions. I said, of course. Our history club would get together every Wednesday, and he would always show up without fail. I mean, obviously, I thought that he was interested in history, and he just wanted to share this experience with us, but clearly I was wrong. After a few weeks, things were getting a little strange. When it was my turn to read, I would always notice him staring at me. And he also brought up the fact that there were only boys in the club. I explained to him that they probably just had a crush on me and that at least it was a way to get them into the club. He told me I needed to find girls because I was too much of a distraction for the boys. But the way that he said it just sounded like he was really jealous. I did my best to get girls in the club, but literally nobody wanted to join. After a few days, I realized that maybe the best thing for me was just to cancel the club. I was already in so many other clubs, and I didn't want to sacrifice my grades. I basically told the guys that we weren't going to have the club anymore, and they all said that was totally fine. But when I told the principal, he flipped out. He started yelling at me and told me that if I didn't keep the club going, that I would never make it in life. He said I wasn't being responsible and that I was letting down the club. So then I was basically forced into continuing the club. But then things got even stranger. He started showing up to every single get-together. And every time that it was over, he would ask me if he could walk me to my car. I mean, at first I thought he was just doing it so that I could be careful, I guess. But we were still on school property and I'm pretty sure nothing was gonna happen to me. That's when he started asking me if I had a boyfriend or if I liked any boys. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my high school principal tried to date me after I graduated. Trigger warning, if you find this subject gross, please don't watch. And disclaimer, this is not my story time. That's when my principal started asking me if I was dating any boys or if I had any crushes on boys. I obviously felt very uncomfortable when he asked me this, so I simply answered no. Then he told me that I could be honest with him. That's when I told him that I made my parents a promise because I was so close to graduating high school and avoid any distractions like boys. That's when he said that I was an amazing woman and that he wished more of the female students were like me. I quickly got in my car and went home. By the way, I was 2 months away from graduating from high school. Now this is when things start to get really weird. I started seeing him around everywhere in school. Our school was pretty big, but I kept bumping into him everywhere. Every time I would see him, he would be like, "Ho ho, are you stalking me?" I would laugh it off and continue walking. One day after history club, he asked me to come to his office with him. He said that he had a surprise for me. He took me to his office and gave me a book on history. I thanked him and tried to leave as quickly as possible, but then he said, "Don't you like it?" So I stood there having to pretend that I was happy that he gave me this book, when in actuality, it made me really uncomfortable. That's when he said that he had seen me in the library reading a book on World War II, and that he just wanted to surprise me with the same book. So this was already letting me know 2 things. Number 1, he's watching me around school and at the library. And number 2, I'm not noticing when he's watching me. I was so creeped out, but I managed to keep my cool. I said thank you again and basically ran away. For the rest of that week, I tried to avoid him as much as I could. I didn't go anywhere near his office, and I avoided the library, which was one of my favorite places in the school. At this point, graduation was only a week away. I was totally wrapped up in my studies that I actually forgot about the principal. Until one day I get a friend request from him on Facebook. At first I thought it was weird, but then I accepted because I figured, well, I'm graduating, so I'm not really going to be seeing him anymore. 5 minutes after I accepted his friend request, I get this really long message from him praising me, saying all these great things about me. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply said thanks. Finally, the day of graduation came and I was forced to see him face to face. That's when he told me that he actually had another gift for me. That's when he hands me an envelope with a blank check. He had the biggest smile on his face. I told him I couldn't accept it and he got mad. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how my high school principal tried to date me after I graduated. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. After he hands me the blank check, I look at it and tell him that I simply cannot accept it. That's when he gets really angry, snatches the check from me, and tells me that he'll see me later. After the graduation ceremony, I was so happy and I was with my family. That's when he walks up behind me and asks me to keep the check. My family is watching this whole thing go down, by the way. I look at him and say thank you, but no. He then introduces himself to my family. But of course, he doesn't bring up the whole check thing. We all say goodbye and my family and I go have dinner. That very night, he sends me a message on Facebook again, saying that he shouldn't have given me the check, and he felt like he had crossed the line. I actually felt really bad, so I replied asking him to not feel bad. A week later, I get a text message from him. He said that he took the liberty of looking up my phone number and that he actually really wanted to speak to me. He asked if we could meet up for a coffee, and I said yes, unfortunately. We meet up at the coffee shop, and as soon as we sit down, he starts to confess his feelings for me. He said that I was basically his dream girl and that all he wanted was a wife like me. And he also asked me if I would ever consider dating him. I was actually too stunned to speak. As soon as he realized I wasn't saying yes, he asked me not to say anything, got up and left. I ran home and told my parents everything. My parents were really angry. My dad went straight to the cops. The cops told my dad that they had complaints from other students. He apparently did the same thing to them and asked them out once they graduated. And guess what? One of them said yes. The cops even investigated him after.